which mandates that at the beginning of any meeting of a board, the chair shall remind all members of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest under this chapter. The chair also shall inquire as to whether there is any known conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before the board at this time. We have information items on our agenda today. Anyone want to raise their hand about any conflicts of interest with today's agenda? Okay, thank you. The record shows there are none. You have the meeting minutes before you. Thank you for your understanding the detail in them, especially since we have a recommendation to make tomorrow to the full commission. Wanted to capture as much of that as possible. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
This is Commissioner Monist. I'll move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. A second?
Commissioner McAdams, I second.
Thank you, Commissioners Monis and McAdams. Any discussion, any revisions to the meeting minutes? If none, all in favor to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Thank you. We are going to reverse the order of our information items. Thank you for understanding that. The person who is going to go first, coming from the Winston-Salem office, and so matter of consideration of their travel time, we're going to listen to them first. So our first information item is regarding the Greensboro 1,4 dioxane investigation. And we have Jenny Graysneck with the Division of Water Resources, who is based in our Winston-Salem regional office. Welcome.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Can everyone hear me? Let me make sure that I know how to advance this. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Hello, my name is Jenny Graysneck. I'm the Assistant Regional Supervisor for the Winston-Salem Regional Office for the Water Quality Regional Operations Section in the Winston-Salem Regional Office. I've been asked to provide the committee today with an update on the investigation of the 2,1,4-dioxane exceedances that occurred during 2021 in the city of Greensboro. This is an outline of what I'll be discussing today: a review of the Greensboro SOC for 1,4-dioxane and the city's 1,4-dioxane monitoring plan, as well as a review of the sampling data that we have to date. Also, I will provide findings by the department and the city regarding the 2 exceedances that occurred on June 30th and November 3rd, 2021. I'll finish with some next steps and what ongoing monitoring and data review will continue for the city. So let's start with a review of the SOC and the 1,4-dioxane monitoring plan. The original SOC for Greensboro for 1,4-dioxane was approved last year by the EMC in March 2021. And it had an effective date of May 1, 2021. That 2-year version of the SOC had SOC compliance values of 45 micrograms per liter in year 1 and 33 micrograms per liter in year 2. The Fayetteville Public Works Commission and the Haw River Assembly both filed legal petitions against that SOC in April 2021. Due to subsequent settlement negotiations, an amended SOC was approved by the EMC in November of 2021 with an effective date of December 1, 2021. Now the SOC will last for 3 years and has lower SOC compliance values: 35 in year 1, 31.5 in year 2, and 23 in year 3. Also, the city's 1,4-dioxane monitoring plan was amended also as a result of the settlement negotiations. The original monitoring plan included 24 sampling sites. The amended plan now has 58 sites, and that includes the addition of all SIU discharges, as well as Pittsboro's raw water intake. Also, the sampling frequency of those sites has increased. So this map is just to show, it might be a little hard to see, but it's just to show the proximity of the TZ Osborne wastewater treatment plant up in the top left corner in Greensboro to the town of Pittsboro's raw water intake down in the bottom right corner at Bynum. And there are approximately 60 river miles between these two facilities. This map shows the 29 significant industrial users, or what we call SIUs, in Greensboro and how they are spread throughout the collection system. Greensboro's collection system is divided into two sections, or what we call sewer sheds. The yellow part is called the North Buffalo Sewer Shed. The green part is the TZ Osborne Sewer Shed. Both discharge the TZ Osborne wastewater treatment plant. The city has monitored for 1,4-dioxane in both sections, but they have been able to use that data to consistently rule out the North Buffalo Sewer Shed as a significant source of 1,4-dioxane, since all the results from that area have been less than 2 micrograms per liter. Therefore, the focus is on that green section. And as you can see, that's where the majority of the SIUs are located, because every little white box represents an SIU. And I listed those SIUs on the next screen. It's just a close-up version of the key from the previous slide because it was a little difficult to see. So, Greensboro's current 1,4-dioxane monitoring plan, as I said, has 58 sampling sites, all listed here on this slide. I provided you with also with the most current copy of the monitoring plan as an attachment today that you can review as well. At the wastewater treatment plant, the city samples 1,4-dioxane in the influent, effluent, aeration tank, their dewatered sludge cake, and the discharge from their incinerator. All 29 SIUs with 32 separate discharges are also sampled. 7 industrial trunk lines are sampled, 4 of which are continuously monitored. 5 domestic and commercial sites, including universities, hospitals, and residential areas. And then the 5 drinking water sources for Greensboro, Townsend Water Treatment Plant and Mitchell Water Treatment Plant, which are both owned by City of Greensboro. And then they also receive drinking water from the Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority, the City of Burlington, and the City of Greensboro. Also, they sampled the Pittsboro Haw River water intake, obviously, and the Haw River arm of Jordan Lake, which is just below Pittsboro. So now let's review some of the sampling data that we have to date. So this graph shows the 1,4-dioxane effluent concentrations at TZ Osborne since January of 2020. The SOC compliance values are also shown. The original is in orange and the amended is in red. You can see the gradual downward trend in the effluent concentrations, except for those high peaks that you see there, which are the 2 exceedances that we're discussing today. I'm going to go through these next slides a little more quickly. These results were compiled from May 1, 2021, which is the effective date of the SOC, to February 16th, which was just the most recent data that I was able to get from Greensboro while I was prepping this presentation. The important thing to note about this data from the wastewater treatment plant itself is that we know that 1,4-dioxane is not produced at the TZ Osborne wastewater treatment plant. 1,4-dioxane is completely miscible in water. It migrates rapidly in water, and it does not bioconcentrate. This chart shows data from the 7 trunk lines in Greensboro, in the Greensboro collection system, spanning again the same time period of May 2021 to February of this year. The most critical result on this page is in the top line, where you see the 369 micrograms per liter from Patton trunk line during the exceedance that occurred in November. For the November 3rd exceedance, the Patton trunk line had an average daily flow of more than 10 million gallons per day and did deliver the significant load of 1,4-dioxane to the wastewater treatment plant. Greensboro feels that the Patton trunk line is the area to focus on, and we'll continue to discuss that more. This is data from the domestic and commercial areas within the city and doesn't show anything too significant from those areas. And as part of the monitoring plan, as I mentioned, Greensboro regularly samples each of the drinking water sources for the city, and you can see those results here for Greensboro, Townsend and Mitchell Water Treatment Plant, Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority, and then Burlington and Reedsville. These are the other sites being sampled regularly by Greensboro. They're continuing to keep an eye on the landfill leachate, but the volume and the concentration has never been a significant concern because it's less than 25,000 gallons per day coming to the plant from the landfill. Domestic septage from septic haulers has been less than 2 micrograms per liter. Greensboro has sampled numerous times in the Haw River arm of Jordan Lake, which is just downstream of the Pittsburgh drinking water intake. That result that you see on line 3 of 8.76 correlates to the June 30th exceedance. They've also done significant sampling at the Pittsburgh drinking water intake, as well as their finished water, due to those 2 exceedances that occurred last year. The highest results there correlate to the November 3rd exceedance, and you can see those in the last line. So during settlement negotiations, the city agreed to sample each SIU discharge in consecutive quarters during all 3 years of the SOC. Year 1 sampling took place last fall and over this winter. And any SIU with a result greater than 100 micrograms per liter was required to complete something called a source investigation, evaluation, and survey. That means that the SIU was required to investigate sources of 1,4-dioxane at their facility and provide that information to the city. The year 1 trigger for that survey was 100 micrograms per liter. And the year 2 trigger, which will start May 1 of this year, is 31.5 micrograms per liter. And then the year 3 trigger is 23 micrograms per liter. And that will start May 1, 2023. SIUs represent sites 27 through 58 on the monitoring plan and were added to the plan in September 2021 during those settlement negotiations. So the next 4 slides show those results from that direct sampling of the SIUs. So as you'll see from the first slide, Chemol, Ecolab, and the second outfall at Evonik showed results greater than 100 micrograms per liter. The next slide doesn't show any greater than 100 micrograms per liter. Neither does the next slide. But this slide shows both pipes at the Shamrock Brown Summit location, as well as Vertalis, showed results over 100 micrograms per liter. As you can see, the year 1 sampling identified 6 SIU discharges, 5 different facilities, with results greater than 100 micrograms per liter. Those SIUs were required to complete the source investigation, evaluation, and survey. And that includes conducting safety data sheet survey of raw materials, reviewing chemistry of any product waste streams on site, investigating production records and internal waste streams, identifying potential significant sources of 1,4-dioxane, and preparing a response for the city that they could use in evaluating next steps. All of these SIUs listed here submitted their investigations and were required to do further sampling. And all of that sampling is shown here. Nothing conclusive was determined from the survey responses that the city received. Furthermore, the mass of 1,4-dioxane that was discharged on November 3rd cannot be attributed to any of these SIUs listed here based on their typical discharge flow and the concentrations noted here. Greensboro evaluated the potential impact to TZ Osborne wastewater treatment plant based on the highest 1,4-dioxane values from this sampling data and the SIU flow during that exceedance. And none of these industries individually, or even all of them combined, would have had sufficient loading to explain that event that occurred. So let's further discuss the investigation into the June and November exceedances that occurred last year. So this is the same graph that we looked at earlier and shows the peaks of the 615 micrograms per liter on June 30th and the 823 micrograms per liter on November 3rd. Here's some detail about the first incident that occurred on June 30th, 2021. The city collected its weekly effluent grab sample on June 30th, and then surprisingly, got the result back very quickly on July 1. The average of results from 2 labs, since Greensboro always splits their effluent samples between 2 labs, was 615 micrograms per liter. The city contacted DWR and downstream drinking water treatment plants, including Pittsboro, which is the main utility that's impacted since Jordan Lake dilutes anything further downstream. My office also contacted the public water supply section to alert them of the exceedance. The city arranged to sample all of Pittsboro's raw water and finished water with rush lab analysis for the month of July. The next step taken by the city was to notify and question Shamrock, since to this point, they had been thought to be the main source of 1,4-dioxane in the collection system. Shamrock holds daily composite samples according to instructions from the city. Shamrock's retained samples for those days did not indicate Shamrock as the source for this incident. The city sent all other samples that they had collected from the wastewater treatment plant and from their collection system during that specific time period for rush lab analysis, but no clear source was determined. So how did DEQ respond? DWR communicated daily with the city of Greensboro to make sure that we had up-to-date information just as soon as they were receiving it. DWR also held weekly meetings with Assistant Secretary Mace-Moore. Those discussions included data review, elimination of potential causes, and areas of additional monitoring that would be required. A notice of violation and intent to assist penalties was sent to the city on September 1. DWR and city staff did a joint site visit of Shamrock Environmental Corporation, the Brown Summit location, on September 27th, and I'll discuss that next. And an SOC penalty demand letter was sent to the city November 4th, and the city paid on November 15th. So regardless of what results Shamrock reported for that week, DWR felt that it was very important to visit Shamrock and learn about their 1,4-dioxane pretreatment system and how they handle 1,4-dioxane on site. Here are some of the key findings from that September 27th visit. Shamrock tests all incoming wastewaters for 1,4-dioxane during the waste receiving approval process, regardless of the waste subcategory. After the initial sampling, they resample existing waste streams every 6 months. Shamrock collects flow proportional composite samples from the discharge point on each day of their operation. And since they do have 2 separate treatment systems, the treated wastewaters are not commingled until after they have been fully processed, measured, and sampled through their respective treatment systems. During the inspection, we did see where pipe 1 and pipe 2 join with 2 samplers that were set up before they discharged to the city. When asked about the exceedance that had just occurred, Shamrock stated that during that 2-week period prior to the exceedance, only routine wastewater receipts were handled, there was only 1 new client, and there were no service declinations. The city's pretreatment program made some adjustments and improvements after that first incident on June 30th. They set up 3 24/7 surveillance samplers at 3 key trunk lines within the city. Pittsboro Haw River raw water intake was added to the 1,4-dioxane sampling plan. The city agreed to provide effluent data to downstream drinking water utilities on a regular basis. Composite sampling by the city was collected from all 29 SIUs, as I just showed you a few slides ago, and 5 of those SIUs with 6 discharges came back with results greater than 100 micrograms per liter. Also, the city developed and provided a source reduction memo for all of those facilities greater than 100 micrograms per liter, and that's available on their website. It was sent to those facilities. So now some details about the second incident that occurred on November 3rd. The city collected their effluent grab sample on November 3rd, but unfortunately did not get the result back until November 8th and 9th. The average of those results from the 2 separate labs was 879 micrograms per liter. 823 micrograms per liter. The city contacted our office and downstream drinking water utilities as soon as they got that first lab result on November 8th. The city sampled 4 receiving stream locations downstream of TZ Osborne and arranged to sample Pittsboro's raw water and finished water with rush lab analysis once again. The city notified Shamrock immediately and instructed them to send their daily composite samples collected during that week for rush lab analysis. once again, Shamrock samples and collects and holds these daily composite samples per an agreement with Greensboro. Those samples did not indicate Shamrock is the source for this incident either. The city also sent any existing collection system surveillance samples for rush lab analysis, and the surveillance samples from the trunk lines indicated that the patent trunk line with 6 SIUs was the likely source of the high discharge. Therefore, another surveillance sampler was placed at the airport trunk line that has 5 SIUs on it, since it ultimately drains to the patent trunk line. There are now 4 continuous surveillance samplers at the following locations in the collection system: Bryan Park, Airport, Patton, and Arlington. During the November 3rd event, the patent trunk line results were the highest ever recorded at that site at 369 micrograms per liter. And remember, there was no sampler at the patent trunk line during the June 30th event. No clear source has been determined for either exceedance, but the focus is on the patent trunk line. On November 12th, the city held a mandatory meeting with the 5 SIUs on the patent trunk line that had previous results greater than 15 micrograms per liter. And that's the SIU sampling that they had done previously. They went back to look at those results and picked which ones on the patent trunk line had results greater than 15. Those SIUs were required to begin daily composite sampling and collection and retention. The daily composites they collected during the first week of sampling were analyzed. And then after that first week, the daily composites were retained, but weekly composites were analyzed. All the data had to be and continues to be sent to the city. So the data from those 5 SIUs is listed here. Again, the mass of 1,4-dioxane that was discharged on November 3rd cannot be attributed to any of these SIUs listed here based on their typical discharge flow and the concentrations that are noted here. This is some additional in-stream sampling that Greensboro added after the November 3rd event to give them some more additional data on upstream and downstream concentrations. So finally, I'll discuss some next steps. And there are a few points to make here. The TZO effluent and trunk line data, as well as the monitoring plan that I've provided to you, is all posted on the city's website. They post their data as soon as they receive it from their lab. In year 1 of the SOC, any SIU with a value greater than 100 micrograms per liter was required to complete, as we talked about, that source investigation, evaluation, and survey. The trigger in year 2, which will start May 1 of this year, is 31.5. And then the trigger in year 3 is 23 micrograms per liter, and that will start next May of 2023. Also, year 2 of the SOC requires the city to calculate an effluent 1,4-dioxane mass balance using all of this data that they have collected. And a key next step is that the TZ Osborne NPDES permit reissuance and review is in process and will include a 1,4-dioxane limit. One more step that I want to mention. A new city policy on contaminants of emerging concern became effective for the city on February 1, 2022. It outlines the city's approach to emerging compounds and is actually not specific to just 1,4-dioxane. It's specific to, it applies to all emerging compounds. This new policy will allow the city to hold industries accountable and issue civil penalties to those that cause an exceedance of the SOC compliance value. This new policy can also be reviewed on the city's website. So we will provide the next update to Water Quality Committee on the Greensboro SOC in July of 2022. That's on the plan. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions from members? It's a lot to process. Obviously, a lot of work by both the Winston-Salem Regional Office and the City of Greensboro. Well, I have a question or two. But if anyone else wants to ask?
Yes, can I just ask a
Commissioner Monaco.
clarifying question? So it sounds like there's been a lot of investigation done and we're still just not sure where the larger discharges are coming from. Is that the summary?
Right.
Okay, just making sure I have that.
Although we have been able to narrow it down, or they have, I shouldn't say have done.
Well, so, and did you say like who's next? Are there other facilities that could be the source?
So it's hard for them to track it down if it's not there. Does that make sense? The numbers were high on those 2 days, and like the last sample we got from Greensboro was at their effluent was 2 micrograms per liter. So it's hard to track and trace throughout the collection system when they're not able to trace the numbers. 1,4-dioxane isn't, it's difficult because it used to be used as, it used to be used more as a raw ingredient or something that they were bringing into manufacturing. And now it's something that's happening during the manufacturing process. So it's harder to track down.
Okay.
And this might have been something that someone was making every quarter or every 6 months. And if that concentration is not there in the collection system for them to track, it makes it very difficult.
So it could still be the facilities that are under kind of closer scrutiny right now, or it could be somebody else.
Right.
Okay, but we're kind of tightening the net
Well, definitely.
with the
and
monitoring.
They know that, because, in July, they did not have it. They didn't, or that June data point, they did not have a sampler at Patent Trunk Line. So we didn't know. But they do know now that it had to have come from there. 10 million gallons flow and to reach 369 micrograms per liter at Patent Trunk Line. And then to get that, that's, there's a lot of flow at TZ Osborne. It's a 56 million gallon plant. That's a lot. That's a lot of 1,4-dioxane. So the hope is, they feel very confident that it is in the Patent Trunk Line, whether it's in an SIU or an IU or a random company. I'm not sure.
So we wait for the next time. Hopefully this never happens again, but we wait for the next time this does happen, and then we have closer monitoring data to help with the detective work.
I would hate to say that it has to happen again for us to find out, but unfortunately, it's difficult to track without the numbers there. And I know we all don't want to see it, and I know Greensboro doesn't want to see it. But they have they have constant surveillance at this point, and they would be able to more easily track it now back to whatever company it is.
Okay. Thank you.
So on slide 12 of 38, that was the slide that I think we used to focus in on patent.
Right, I can.
Pointed out the number 369 and above, I guess, for that.
Right, okay.
However, I do see 560 for the Bryan Park Shamrock. Why was that dismissed, and for what reason?
Well, right, and that's why it's important to realize the difference in the flow of the different trunk lines. And the Patent Trunk Line does have 10 million gallons, so anything coming from the Patent Trunk Line is going to be extremely significant. 369 from that amount of flow is going to create much more effect on the wastewater treatment plant than a 560 with much less flow. And I'm not sure, I could find out the exact flow of Bryan Park, but that particular one is only Shamrock. Bryan Park Trunk Line only has that one SIU on it.
Another question or an idea that came to mind as we began looking at this with the 2 spikes that we had was asking myself, is there potential that someone cleaned out a tank in one surge quarterly? Because they are about 3 months apart. So can you tell us what you're finding out about that?
I mean, something like that, I mean, there's always potential for dumping, and that's hard to investigate with anything, not just 1,4-dioxane. So that's hard to track down. We know that there is, Shamrock does have a truck washing facility, but those results came back at fairly low. And the contents of those trucks, you know, they're empty when they arrive there. It would have to be, as we've mentioned, a significant amount. So just washing a truck is probably not going to create the kind of concentration in order to flip the switch on TZ Osborne at, you know, averaging 30 to 35 million gallons per day.
I'm thinking more of a storage tank, not a transport.
Well,
tank.
and,
Yeah.
you know, and a manhole, or, I mean, you know.
Yeah. So, but you are given access to their operating records if you need them, right? To know when they do clean outs or.
To
what-
Shamrock?
Yes.
Well, we have not investigated in terms of truck cleanouts because I think that, well, we do know that the trucks arrive there empty. So the contents are taken to the facility at Bryan Park to be treated, and then the empty trucks go to that other facility. There is some 1,4-dioxane coming from that truck washing facility, but like I said, it's an empty truck, so and the flow there is insignificant compared to.
You might explain to the committee what the nature of their business is.
Shamrock is a centralized waste treatment facility. They're an environmental cleanup company that is originally from Greensboro. And so they have a pretreatment. They have actually a pretreatment system. And then they also just recently, in the past several years, installed a 1,4-dioxane treatment system that I think should also work for other emerging compounds.
So any party who has waste that they need to have managed, and in this case, this is a listed hazardous waste, but it's in dilute form, I guess, in a wash or some sort of a liquid. They bring it to that facility to be managed according to what the regulations allow. And if I recall correctly, this particular type of operation with wastewater, because it has an MPDES permit, is given I guess, is it a permit by rule under RCRA or some sort of a hazardous waste clearance that is different than a typical hazardous waste disposer?
Right. I'm not completely sure about that. I would have to look and find out. I know we've discussed that in the past, and I believe that's the answer that we have come to, but I'm not completely sure about all the facets of that.
The last scenario that we've talked about before is, I don't know whether I'm using the term properly, but that is illicit discharge. And if somebody's dumping into the sewer somewhere, unbeknownst to us.
Right.
Right. Okay. Will this monitor, not the monitoring that's required by the SOC, but will the division continue, or the Winston-Salem Regional Office continue this investigation? Will it remain open, or are we being asked to close it at this point?
I'm not sure about that. That's probably a question that goes over my head.
Okay.
Maybe with the guy sitting beside you. I mean, our office remains in close contact with Greensboro because of the SOC, but also just because of one of our MPDS facilities. And so I feel like it's constantly open. I think Greensboro feels like it's still open. Those SIUs are still sampling and having it analyzed weekly. So those patent trunk line SIUs are still sampling. And I think the idea is, if something happens, then we surely would have to have more information than we did before. So there's a lot that is still going on and will be ongoing. I don't know whether the DEQ investigation, I mean, that's I'm not sure about that. But in terms of whether Greensboro continues to investigate, they absolutely are continuing. And so we will, try to find out or glean as much as we can from the city from that as they continue.
The investigation was begun at the direction of the EMC, and it was taking its own independent path from the SOC because we were already in the midst of SOC negotiations. So I think probably the consensus of the commission is that we still want to find out what the answer is so that the investigation should remain open.
Okay.
And you can periodically report to us again,
Okay.
especially if another spike occurs.
Absolutely.
Please let us know.
Yes.
I mean, I know sometimes some of us just sort of stumble across this information, especially in the early days. I'm so glad that the reporting system is much more formalized now. So,
Okay.
Well, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Oh, excuse me. Assistant Secretary Macemore, would you like to say something? I didn't notice that your hand was up. Director Smith noticed you raised your hand.
Yeah, I didn't want to not have your question answered. This continues to be part of our ongoing work. We think not only the investigation, but a better understanding of all the sources, but the contributions from those sources that Jenny just described. We're also looking at previously inactive sites that we have records of, perhaps permitted by air sources or other regulatory programs. We do know that some sites that were operating there did manage or created byproducts of 1,4-dioxane. So through our 112R program, also looking at EPA's databases, looking at types of processes and activities that could cause 1,4-dioxane to be formed and perhaps be collected, perhaps in groundwater. We did identify one plant that became inactive in the late 2000s. Their groundwater data does show 3 wells with high levels of 1,4-dioxane. We're not sure whether that could actually contribute to the kind of concentrations we're looking at, or even it reaches the plant itself. But this is bringing up more highlights to the attention to potential sources that collectively contribute to the large level of 1,4-dioxane that we see in the Cape Fear River region. So I would say that we would like to come back in July, particularly related to Greensboro, but we're looking at a holistic strategy here. There is a mapping system that Julie and her team, Rib and her team have created that looks at what levels of 1,4-dioxane that we have detected thus far. And based on that, would like to systematically address them through our regulatory processes, but also be able to identify what else could be done. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Yes. So clearly this is more than just Greensboro where this is happening.
That's right.
So we have to take a broader look, and we appreciate the department's leadership in doing that. Thank you.
Sure.
Now we'll move to the next agenda item, which is an overview of delegated riparian buffer programs and stormwater programs. Our first presenter is Shelton Sullivan with the Division of Water Resources. And y'all may recognize Mr. Sullivan from his support during our pandemic WebEx broadcast. And we thank you for that as well. These reports today were made at my request, and others are probably interested in it too. As you know, we have a variety of local programs, and periodically we get requests for revisions or new model ordinances to be written. I thought it would be very helpful for us to get an overview of all the programs and also learn how the division monitors the performance of those local programs. So thank you for coming today. We also have a matrix that they created of all the programs. And thank you for creating a larger readable version that we can take home and study. Thanks.
Thank you again. I'm Johnson Sullivan with the Division of Water Resources, 401 and Buffer Permitting Branch. Starting off one of 4 presentations here about our local programs and the stormwater and buffer local programs within our what we manage here. I'm going to start off with the buffer programs. First, so just an overview. Oh, yeah. Okay. Just a quick overview of where the buffer programs are in the state. Got Tar-Pamlico in the east, the Full Basin, the Tar-Pam Basin, the News Basin, which we're in, has riparian buffer rules. Jordan Watershed is the Jordan Lake Watershed specifically, and the Randleman Lake as well, water supply watershed there. To the west, the Catawba is on the map in yellow, is not the full basin, it's just the main stem of the Catawba River, including Lake James and downstream to the South Carolina border. And the Goose Creek watershed is in Union and Union County. It's a small watershed there. So we have six riparian buffer programs in the state. We can't click it. Okay. So again, this is going to be a quick overview of the rules and the program. So in each of the rules, there are, just an overview, there are listed specific purposes that are listed in each rule. The maintain protection of existing riparian buffers, maintain the nutrient removal functions of those buffers to protect the streams, pollutant removal to protect streams, and the stream protection function in general. Other functions that are listed and purposes in the rules are to protect the water quality of the main stem lakes. That one is in the Catawba. Water supply uses specifically in the Jordan Lake and the Randleman rules. And in the Goose Creek, those rules were developed to protect specific endangered species, specifically the Carolina hill split. So those are the purposes that are in the rules itself. So who implements these rules? One are the delegated local governments. So they wish to be delegated to implement the rules. They request that or delegation from the Environmental Management Commission to enforce and develop a riparian buffer program. So the 4 here, the Goose Creek, Catawba, Neuse, and Tar-Pam, they have specific criteria that's listed in the rules on the delegation process and what is included with that, what that entails in the rules. So local governments request a delegation from the EMC, and EMC denies or issued that delegation. So the other ones that we have are designated by rule. So those are the ones, the local governments in the Jordan and the Randleman watersheds. And the way it's worded, a local governments within the water supply watersheds with land use authority must establish a riparian buffer protection program. So the program includes, everything from identifying what is buffered, the implementation of that, buffer approvals, and the whole gamut of the buffer rule. The North Carolina Forest Service, they implement. They are delegated for the buffer applicability within forestry activities or on forestry sites. So water resources, we implement the program, but they have the delegation to determine the applicability part of the features. And of course, Division of Water Resources, and we implement where there are no local jurisdiction. And this is an example of, even though there are many delegated and designated, there are still activities where DWR implements the rule. Under state and federal projects, it can be within the delegated programs. Those still fall under DWR's authority. Multiple jurisdiction projects, locally funded projects, for example, a school may be funded by a local government, then that falls toward DWR. Agriculture is DWR. Forestry, again, except for the buffer determined, the applicability part. In areas built beyond the local program jurisdiction. This slide here, the map, is an example of it. Pitt County. Pitt County is a large county. They are delegated the Neuse and the Tar-Pam buffer rules, the Neuse being the southern part of the county. However, they don't have jurisdiction in the municipalities, so our regional office still have to go out and implement the buffer rules within those municipalities. Some counties and municipalities have an interlocal agreement so the counties can do that. But I know for certain that Greenville does not. So our staff still go out and implement the program in a lot of these areas. So who are the designated programs for the riparian buffer rule? Now the designated ones are, again, in the Jordan and Randall buffer water supplies. And in Jordan, we have 33 that are designated. And you can see them listed there. And again, they were designated by rule. They have a water supply, watershed, and they have a land use authority as well. So at 33 in Jordan, Randall one is a smaller watershed. And again, they have water supply, watershed, and a land use authority. 11 municipalities are designated there by rule. Who are the delegated programs? Those are the ones that have asked delegation from the EMC. So in the Neuse buffer basin, we have 5 delegated programs. Tar-Pamlico, there's 1, Pitt County, that I showed you on the map. Catawba River, again, is along the main stem of the Catawba River. There's 2. That's really both sides of Lake James, McDowell and Byrd County. Goose Creek is mostly Union County, small watersheds, protection of the endangered species. Mecklenburg County, they have jurisdiction within the town of Mint Hills jurisdiction only. So with those 2 delegated and designated, we have 53 programs that are in these categories. So these programs are required again to implement the programs, develop the tools necessary to do that, train staff, identify what the buffer applicability, what is buffered, and go through any approval process, buffer authorizations, things like that. So in one part that is real specific in the rules, they must appoint a riparian buffer protection administrator. And that administrator must be trained, the initial training session given by the Division of Water Resources. And that is per the statute 143-214.25A, which entails one part of that is the surface water identification training that we, Division of Water Resources, in conjunction with the NC State, we conduct that training twice a year. There's approximately 30 students per class. And it's really geared toward Well, a lot of local governments come to the certification because they obviously need it. Our staff with staff turnover, they're constantly in need of that training to be certified to identify what feature is buffer applicability in the field. You have to be certified for that. The North Carolina Forest Service, again, they're delegated for that determination on forestry sites, and some consultants. Again, we have this class twice a year. It's really always full, and luckily NC State has partnered with us, and they handle a lot of the logistics. But just a quick thing about the class is it's a 4-day class, some classroom, and a lot of field work, things we go over, or what you're looking at in the field, what makes up a stream, the geomorphology of the stream, hydrology, and the biology of the stream. 3 criteria we look at. Of course, and we use the maps that are available as tools to make that determination as well. Local oversight. As written in the rule, DWR shall periodically inspect local programs, and we do that to ensure they are implementing their ordinance as approved by the EMC. Even with that said, honestly, our main oversight that we use on a day-to-day basis is our regional office staff. Our staff is constantly doing inspections, communicating with these local programs. Almost really day to day. So if there's when they have questions, when the local programs have questions, they call us. So it really is a good communication as far as keeping track of what's going on. And I guess another point, if things are not going as per the rule, or we'll hear about it, and there'll be complaints. So we do handle those as well. So again, on local oversight, a few years back, 2017, 28, we did do a audit of 8 local programs in these 4 basins: Catawba, Jordan, Randall, and Neuse. And we quickly realized that as we were doing these audits, that what we really needed internally was more updated outreach and education material. It really came to the forefront, and some of the site visits that we did. Actually, one that's not listed here that I went to personally was Rocky Mountain. They're not delegated, but they wanted a lot of information about the buffer rules, and I didn't have anything to give them as far as updated material. So we really realized that was a big need for outreach materials. So I guess fast forward to 2020 and 21, Water Research Institute, WRI, NC State, with DEQ, we secured a grant, 205J water quality planning grant that was titled the Riparian Buffer Education Resources for Local Programs. So we secured that grant, and we were able to develop outreach materials, which I'll show you that in a second, and the presentations, brochures, and flyers. And we were able to conduct virtual training sessions during COVID. But honestly, I think having the virtual sessions, we were probably able to reach quite a few people, honestly. We had 2 sessions, February and March of 21. We had 94 attendees. Many of those were local programs. It was about a 2 or 3 hour session with, I can't remember how many PowerPoints, but quite a few. We followed up with a Q&A session in April, and some of those people did have some good comments and questions. So I thought that was a really successful event. Again, on the materials, we updated some of the graphics that we have available. The PowerPoint presentations are listed online for use for the local governments or for anyone really. But they are geared for the main goal is trying to educate the local programs. We developed a new brochure, which handed those out. It's updated numbers, and it's just it looks nice, I think. Luckily, WRI really helped us out with that. And that that's really the only ones that's been printed. They're online, so local governments can download it and print it themselves. So part of all this material, the outreach material, brochures are now on a new website housed within our Riparian Buffer website. Yeah, you have the graphics and everything's downloadable, and we developed, which I'll attempt to show y'all in a moment. And in conjunction with WRI and NCC grant, part of the grant, they got a consultant and developed this 2-minute animated video regarding the riparian buffer. So hopefully we'll be able to see that in a moment. So what are we planning to do next? I'd like to reach out to the 53 local programs and see, since our training a couple years ago, to see how it's going, see if they have any questions regarding the updated rules, and just try to get some feedback from them on how it's going, and if they need anything specifically from us. A couple of months ago, we were contacted by a Stormwater Association in North Carolina, and I participated in that virtually, and got some questions about some issues that they were having. So I just want to keep that communication going, and I guess with COVID, conduct not with COVID, but I guess it's taught us how to be more with the WebEx teams and whatnot, how to reach a lot of people in a much easier logistical way. So we can keep that going. This is one of the handouts, just a compilation of the updated rules, the citations, in a table format. That's really all it is. And if you look on some rules were updated June of 2020, which is on the list. Also on the list, the buffer mitigation consolidated mitigation rule was effective 2015. That's on the list as well. One that was not updated is the Jordan buffer rule was not updated in 2020. The last effective date listed is 2014. So here's in the presentation, just a lot of different links to our website. There's a link to the buffer rules, not buffer rules, the buffer education outreach link is there, with our few of our contact information there. So what I would like to do is see if this works. I'll try to get this going. Copy link. Where are you? Can copy link. This works so well in the office. Okay. Oh, that's
They're in late.
Oh, what?
What? Whether stream. We all have water, but while it's used.
All right.
Whether it's lakeside, streamside. We all love. Might want to consider this. Strip of land, vegetation, and borders. This is called a riparian buffer, and it may not look impressive, but the three things: filter out and provide natural flow. So, state has and we landlubbers efforts do their job and leaving them alone. So now, go ahead. Spreading the word.
Thank you. Any questions from members? It was a great video. Who's the target audience and how is it distributed, disseminated?
It's on websites. Really geared to any website. Once trying to make it for Google, whatever. Make it to it. Just to get some word out about education.
Well, I know y'all appreciate the funding from the Water Resources Research Institute for that. And keep pushing it out there. Hopefully you'll get the word out. I do have a question about designated versus delegated. Does the division or the department have the ability to take action against against designated programs compared to delegated programs if they're not performing up to par?
Yes, we do have that. It's written in the rules. We do have that authority.
Does the division have adequate staff to conduct routine audits?
No, we do not.
No, you do not. Okay.
But again, we do not, as far as an audit per se, but again, things that are not tracked are the really communication that we have. I mean, I've talked to past few weeks. I'm not in the regional office, and I've probably talked to 2 or 3 of them about just issues. So I know the regional office staff have a lot of interaction with them, and I feel like that's how we get more compliance, or with at least consistency between us and the local governments that way.
Occasionally, this committee gets a request for variance. We had one a year or 2 ago. And it was in I think a designated program, not a delegated program.
Okay.
And the variance was granted. given the conditions that the applicant, petitioner, laid out. And it's my understanding that the project began, construction began, and inconsistencies with the specifications of the petition and the drawings were not found until after the facility was completed. That is, apparently, the local designated program may not have gone out during construction to make sure that they were complying with specifications. How does the state communicate with these delegated and designated programs to make sure that that does not happen in the future?
Well, variances. In the past, the variance, when it comes to the EMC, our staff are involved in helping gather that information from the local government, because from the EMC. So as far as follow up on the site, we probably just don't have enough staff to do that either. Really, but
as part of the training, it needs to be understood by these local programs that it's their responsibility to make sure that the construction is carried out as planned.
that's true.
And that it cannot be abused, and that the recipient of the variance doesn't come back later and say, well, I'm sorry, I've already finished my facility.
That is true.
I know there are enforcement opportunities, but you just want to prevent it instead of having to react to it.
That is true. And I can think of a couple off that I know of where variance was issued where they are out of compliance. And I guess it's probably no, I'm assuming it's no really different than just a regular permit.
Yeah. So I say this because I know that the staffing is shorted and for the state, and I would hope that when the department goes for funding to the legislature, that they stress the importance of having adequate staff to perform audits or to monitor the performance closer, so that the local programs who may not be getting the message or routinely training their staff to function the way they should can help avoid these issues in the future.
Absolutely. I do think if we had dedicated compliance staff, not just permitting with some compliance, that would make a big difference.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And who follows after you? Mr. Clark.
Yeah, unfortunately, due to a family medical issue, Jeanette Powell is not able to present. So I'm going to present for Jeanette, and I just actually got a few minutes ago, she provided me some notes that I
Okay.
which is great. It'll help me do this presentation. And then also at the end of my presentation, I said I would call Jeanette. She's able to watching this, via online, and call her. And if there are any questions that I'm not able to answer, possibly she can answer. So we're going to try to work it that way. We'll see how.
Thank you,
See
Mr.
how it
Clark.
goes.
Thank
Sure.
you. Yeah.
So yeah, I'll be talking about the NPDES MS4 permitting and urbanizing area programs. Basically, stormwater is divided between two divisions, Dimmler Division of Energy, Mineral and Land Resources, and then the Division of Water Resources. In DWR, the stormwater programs are primarily nutrient-based. The NMS stands for Nutrient Management Strategy. Goose Creek is an exception there, and it focuses on rare, threatened, and endangered species. A difference to note is that the DWR watershed stormwater programs are watershed management strategies that apply to specific local governments that have been named as such. The Dimmler stormwater has a few main areas. Two are listed here, which are going to be covered more extensively in this presentation. But I also want to mention within stormwater, We also have the NPDES Industrial Stormwater Permitting Program that is comprised of individual and general permits. We also have the NPDES Construction Stormwater Program, which probably has the highest volume, where we get approximately 15 to 20 applications a day for coverage under that particular permit. I'm going to talk a little bit about the bullets listed here. The USMP, the Universal Stormwater Management Program, is an optional program for local governments to basically consolidate all the multiple requirements into a single, efficient, and effective program. It hasn't been that popular because the rules aren't as clear, and as of right now, I think there's only 6 local governments that are participating in the USMP program. The Coastal Counties program, it applies the post-construction requirements to the 20 coastal counties and is implemented by DMLR, not by local government. And then there's also the high-quality outstanding resource waters in the non-coastal counties, and that similarly applies to post-construction requirements in certain areas and is implemented by DMLR. Oh, important to note that, again, DWR's programs are watershed management programs, whereas DMLR's stormwater programs are permitting programs. This map needs to be updated, but the reason it's being shared is just to show you the complexity of the post-construction stormwater program within North Carolina. And I think EPA actually commented to Jeanette or someone at one time, in their experience, they believe that North Carolina maybe has the most complicated post-construction stormwater program in the country. So it can be pretty complicated. This next map also needs to be updated, but again, this shows the great number of permits here. And one, I think, color that's not denoted in the legend is the green dots. They are associated with the post-construction permits. And again, you can see there's a lot in the coastal zone. As I mentioned earlier, it's 20 coastal counties that have a part of the post-construction stormwater permit. So EPA delegated the program to North Carolina, to DEQ. And what basically DEQ does is they provide customer support. They issue the permits. They do the permitting process. They conduct the compliance audits. They do documentation and tracking of the program, and they report to EPA. Make sure I'm in. Okay. And then the program is locally implemented so that the local governments are expected to fund their programs. And this is a key thing, they have to document all the different things they're doing to implement the program. They report annually to the state. A big part of the permit, which is an enforceable part of the permit, is the stormwater management plan. And then a big part of that is implementing the 6 minimum control measures. All right. So the NPDES MS4 program, it targets, as it says, it targets the urbanized areas. Basically, an MS4 permit is required for every MS4 that owner or operator with jurisdiction within the U.S. Census Bureau designated urbanizing area. And let's see. Oh, and here we have the six minimum measures are mentioned here. It's significant to note that although MS4s only represent 4% of the land area, they comprise 80% of the population. So it's significant. It's significant. The MS4 and a proper implementation of the program would have a significant impact on water quality in the United States. My targets, okay. 6 measures. Yeah, just the post-construction is one of the minimum measures, and it says that's our emphasis of today's presentation, post-construction related stuff. All right. So we have about 120 plus municipalities, local governments in North Carolina that implement the MS4 within their areas. DOT has a significant footprint in North Carolina with the 80,000 miles of roadway. So basically, roadway in all 100 counties. It's a huge collection system. Oh, this is interesting. If you laid those 80,000 miles of roadway end to end, it would circle the earth 3 times. So anyway, that's a lot of roads. But what's interesting here in North Carolina is that the counties do not own and operate the MS4s in their boundaries because they lie within the public right-of-way that the NCDOT owns. So therefore, in North Carolina has a statewide NCDOT TIS4 permit, and there's only one county permit, which is voluntary. In other states, there are county MS4 permits. So you have a situation where you have your municipalities, you have your boundaries, but then the question is, what about the urbanized areas that are outside? You know, they're outside of the jurisdiction of local governments' boundaries and outside of the NCDOT right of way. So this is where we have a situation where of the 6 minimum measures, just the post-construction requirement of the MS4 program is applied to certain situations, tipped counties and municipal sphere of influence areas. DMLR implements and issues these permits. The local government can request implementation of these, but as of right now, only 6 of those 24 tipped counties are implementing the post-construction requirements at the local level. Oh yeah, that's right. The bullet right there is part of the reason that we have these extra areas, if you will, and that it says right there, the state statute prevents MS4 coverage in the ETJ of a city or town unless they request it. And so again, that's why we have these post-construction requirements as sort of these areas that fall outside of the local government jurisdictional boundaries. All right. This is just an example of a municipality within North Carolina where you see the jurisdictional boundary, but then the larger MSI area. The Shelby's ETJ is shown in green and is part of the MSI, and then they're also part of the MSI and the county is shown in blue. So basically in those areas outside of basically Shelby's and MS4, they would follow the 6 minute measures. In the light green and the blue areas, it would be the post-construction requirements, stormwater requirements that would be followed in those areas, the other colored areas. This sort of gives a history and also what is planned ahead for the MS4 program. It started back in the 1990s with just six large phase 1 MS4s, and they believe there were Raleigh, Durham, Charlotte, Fayetteville, Winston-Salem, and Greensboro are the 6 phase 1 communities, and then NCDOT got a permit as well. In the 2000s, the program was expanded to include municipalities, local governments with smaller populations, again, the 115, and then also brought in, as you see, the MSI, in the tipped counties, again, these areas that have to follow the post-construction requirements only. Every 10 years, a census is performed. So one was performed just a few years ago. It's expected that, they have to take some time to analyze the data and go through it, is that new designations, possibly new phase 2 MS4s will be added to the universe that we now regulate in about 2024. It's the expectation. Okay. And it says right here, the Water Quality Committee will receive future presentations on this designated process. So I guess that's, stay tuned. This is how the program has done so far. Actually, it was in, catch up here with my notes over here. In 2018, actually, the EPA audited North Carolina's MS4 program and sort of helped start this process and start the process that we're on right now. With more regular audits and that type of thing. So as you can see, the numbers are improving. When we first started doing the audits, the NOV, the notice of violation rate, was pretty high, but it is coming down. And just so you know, the NOD, yes, notice of deficiency and a violation, and we have a few compliances as well. The way it should be noted too, one reason why the numbers have changed, that Daimler began the audits with a focus on the MS4 suspected being the most in need of compliance. So the ones that were most likely to have problems and need assistance. And so they expect about a 50% non-compliance rate. And unfortunately, it was 82% the first year. However, as you can see, we are increasing. We are improving in that the NOV rate is going down each year. I want to add that in addition to the compliance audits, Daimler has issued 41 MS4 permit renewals, has 45 permit applications in backlog. This is important because the compliance effort also needs to adjust the permitting load for staff throughout the 5-year permit cycle in order for the MS4 program to be sustainable. And again, finally, the goal, Daimler's goal is compliance, not enforcement. Most audited MS4s are complying with their notices and working hard with support from Daimler staff to get their programs into compliance. There are 6 audited MS4s that have not taken appropriate action to come into compliance. One has been issued penalties this year. Basically, this is the first time in the history of MS and North Carolina's MS4 permitting for an enforcement action to go to penalties. So this essentially puts us at a 1% enforcement rate. This is a slide that just has some of, well, it has Jeanette's contact information. It has some just updates and that type of thing that we do have a lot of, not just for MS4, but there's a lot of resources on our stormwater website. And this just gives a summary of the different tools and resources that are available. And one thing I noticed that is not mentioned here is that, again, we were audited in 2018. And so in the beginning of 19, the Stormwater branch conducted about 4 or 5 workshops throughout the state, specifically focusing on the MS4 program. It was attended by many, a majority of the local governments did attend one of these workshops that were from the east to the western part of the state. And questions were asked and that type of thing. Again, the idea to provide hopefully a good overview for the local governments and to prepare them, to help them prepare themselves for upcoming audits, upcoming preparation of stormwater management plans, the permits, all the different things that they have to do. And then again, these are some of the specific resources that are available on the. And that's, hopefully I covered everything as well as Jeanette would have done. If you have any questions, I can, that I'm not able to answer, I can call her and she could possibly answer. She could possibly answer for me.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? I'll ask a
Okay.
question. For the 6 that were audited and found to be in violation of, what types of penalties are they given? And are they ever at risk of losing their authority or their program authority, I should say?
I may call Jeanette about the specifics about the penalties because I don't know that. But as far as are they in danger of
Permit.
losing? Yeah, I would say probably not because what that would mean is that instead of the local government having to implement the program, the North Carolina then would have to take more of a role, and we just don't have the resources to do that. Do you want me to try to call Jeanette about the penalty
That's okay.
question? Oh,
Just a question to think about.
okay. And she's listening to this, so she's maybe taking notes as well.
Director Wren knows that through the Sedimentation Control Commission that there are disciplinary actions that can be taken for programs that fall under that commission's authority. And that's the type of question I'm asking Director Wren. Do you have anything that you could share with us about in this program or maybe something else that's going to be presented later? Are there similar paths that the department can take to determine whether or not a program should maintain its authority or?
Good afternoon. In relationship to some of our local programs that we do through the Sediment Commission, that those delegated programs, there's obviously that the ability to take that delegation away is there. With the local program for a water supply watershed, I'm not as familiar with that setup. We haven't gone down that path in the past. We do have audits. We do make sure that they're following their ordinances and provide some guidance on them to them on when they're not. But I don't think we've gotten to a point where we feel like taking delegation away is the proper step. So we can certainly investigate that a little bit more and talk to our general counsel a little bit and see what those steps would be.
I don't have a particular case in mind. I'm just curious. Chair Smith, you were going to remark?
I was just going to say that one thing to keep in mind about the MS4 program in particular is unlike the sedimentation program and some of the other buffer programs, these aren't delegations really. These are permits. So this is happening under their NPDES stormwater permit. So it's just a different construct in terms of how you approach it. So it's not a matter of delegating or not delegating. It's a question of enforcing the permit requirements.
Thank you. That's a good distinction. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and that's exactly right. That's a great point by Chair Smith. We have gone through some NOV and enforcement procedures with our MS4 programs where we just have our first civil penalty assessment to a MS4 permit holder just last week, I believe. And so we have gone through that, but we have not taken away a permit at this point for MS4 program. The comments on the water supply watershed were related to what I would consider a delegated program in that situation.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to everyone.
Okay, well now I'm going to give the presentation on the water supply watershed protection program, and I'm the coordinator of that program. So yeah, my notes for that. So actually, the water supply watershed protection program is one of the older post-construction stormwater program related programs in North Carolina. Again, it focuses on protecting the surface water. It does not involve groundwater. The bill was ratified back in 1989. There were public meetings in 90. Reclassifications took place in around 92. And then in 1993 and 94, local governments were expected to prepare, submit their ordinance, have them approved, and maps of their water supply watershed protection areas. As you can see, there are different colors and different shapes. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those different colors and shapes a little bit later in this presentation. So there's, two main focuses, if you will, of the water supply watershed protection program. One is to minimize the volume of stormwater runoff, and then also to minimize the pollutant load of the stormwater runoff. And how that is done through limiting built upon area or impervious cover, implementing vegetative setbacks or buffers, in some cases using stormwater control measures. And then there are also certain prohibitions, certain activities are allowed and not allowed within the water supply watershed waters. As you can see just by the name, the program is driven by the water classification. They're all North Carolina waters are classified according to their uses. And so there's a subset of waters in North Carolina that are classified as water supply because they are used as water supply. And so basically any local government that has part or all of their jurisdiction falling within a water supply watershed has to implement the water supply watershed protection program. And again, their primary classifications, and I just gave some examples of some supplemental water quality classifications. So how do you define the area that is going to be covered under the program? You can have a water supply that's a reservoir, such as in this slide, and you have a critical area which is closest to the intake, and then an area outside of that. The critical area extends for the reservoirs half-mile out from the full pool level of the reservoir, or further out from that. In the watershed 2 and 3, as you may have seen, there were 1 through 5 different categories. In 2 and 3, it covers the balance of the watershed, basically to the ridge line. For the WS4, it is called a protected area, and it either goes out 5 miles or to the ridge line, whichever is closer. You also have water supplies that tap rivers, streams, and again, the critical area is a half-mile stream from that intake. And again, you either have the balance of the watershed for WS2 or 3, or again, in this case, 10 miles up the stream is, and that's why you sometimes see on the map, you saw some of the boundaries look like they follow the ridge line, some look like they're an arc. In the cases of the arc, those were just the measuring out the 10 miles from the intake location. So in this case, the state law, the state water supply watershed law, is implemented at the local government. So the local government has a number of different responsibilities. I mentioned already, they develop and implement the watershed protection ordinance. They are to develop and maintain maps that clearly delineate the boundaries of the watershed. Projects come in and they review them for compliance. There are some examples of interlocal agreements, which I'm going to mention a little bit in a later slide. What that refers to, they have to do record keeping and recording. They do not have to submit those records to the state. They just have to maintain them and have them available for program review audit purposes. They're responsible for the maintenance of their stormwater control measures, and then they also will review and either approve or deny variances. These are approximate numbers. So there's about 82 counties and 270 municipalities and the airport authority. The reason I say it's an approximate number is because in a number of cases, there have been interlocal agreements between the county and the municipality, whereby the county has agreed to implement the water supply watershed program for the municipality. And there's a handful of them. It changes a little bit too, because I can think of an example just within the past year where that agreement expired, and so the municipality had to develop their own program. But that accounts for maybe 10 to 20 or so. So it can seem to be 290. There's a little bit less than that, just because of these interlocal agreements between the counties and the municipalities. This is just a list of the regulations, and for those who don't know, These were recently improved and revised, actually shortly after I started in 2019, in that the water supply watershed regulations used to actually be spread through a wide, actually pretty wide variety of regulations. Now they're more focused in this set and hopefully easier to read and easier to use than they were previously. And then the main statute for the program is down at the very bottom. This is just a brief summary of some of the resources, but what I will do, because you maybe most recently saw me having to do with the submitting for approval of the ordinance, I can give you an update on that while I'm standing here. So at the last time I was here, the recommendation was made not to approve the draft model ordinance that, and just to give a little background for those that may not know, the draft model ordinance was last prepared in 1995. So the statute changes, regulation changes. There are a lot of reasons to update the ordinance. So I went ahead and did that. I updated the ordinance and I presented it to EMC for approval. And they made a recommendation, which was a good one, especially based on some of the questions that were asked, that perhaps a local government ordinance expert or people with more expertise take a look and review the ordinance. And I will let you know, I've had some review, but I'm actually waiting on to hear back from additional folks to see if I can get additional review of this model ordinance. So I'm still waiting to hear back on that. The second item there is the survey. I sent a survey out. Actually, I've sent it out several times now, but I sent a survey out to all of the local governments. Basically, it was a series of 46 questions, asking them various things about their programs. To me, it was a win-win. To me, it would help me learn more about the programs and where they were. And it would also hopefully encourage the local governments to ask questions and contact me if they didn't understand something or something like that. Because even though the program's been around a while, staff changes and that type of thing, people are still learning about the program. As of latest count, we've only got, let's see if I get the right number. Oh yeah, 39% have responded, which isn't great. But one thing I think I mentioned before, what I'm using the survey results and sort of flipping on the other side, if I have an entity that has not responded to the survey and I haven't had any communication with them at all, because some of them, I get questions, I get people want ordinance revisions reviewed, a number of different communications and interactions I have with the local governments. If I haven't gotten any survey, haven't heard anything from a local government, those are the local governments that would be going to the top of the list for program review, evaluation, audit type process. And then that final thing is just there's some fact sheets and PowerPoints, just some additional information about the program on the website. And I don't know why, I can tell it to you. I don't know why I don't have my phone number here, but you can jot it down if you want. My phone number is 919-707-3642. And I don't know why I didn't put it on here. I just realized. But anyway, that's my phone number and my email. And I'm available for any questions.
Questions? We thank you for continuing to work on that model ordinance, by the way.
Okay.
Are we scheduled to see it any time this
We're not
year?
scheduled, and the reason being, I'll be honest with you, unfortunately, I got one review. I got one review by a person with the School of Government, Richard Wisnan, actually, who has some ordinance review. But he himself said, local government ordinance, that's not my area of specialty. And that's why he recommended some other people that I should contact who had a greater level of expertise in that area. And I'm actually waiting to hear back from them. I'll have to follow up again. I just haven't heard back from the other people I communicated with about possibly being interested in reviewing the ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
And our last presenter.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me all right? Okay. I'm Trish Delconte. I'm with the Non-Point Source Planning Branch, and I'm here to tell you about nutrient management strategy programs. So what we've got is 4 nutrient management strategy stormwater watersheds. That is, those 4, Pamlico, Manus, Falls Lake, and Jordan Lake, have as one of their several rules a stormwater component for managing stormwater from new development. They have other methods, other aspects. They have wastewater. They also have an agricultural rule. It's going to tell you about stormwater. So the objective of the stormwater parts of the nutrient management strategies is to manage the nutrient load, that is nitrogen, more nitrogen and phosphorus, from the stormwater runoff from developed areas, or rather from new development, very specifically, in a lot of cases. Some of it is from existing development, and I'll try and explain the difference in how that works. All 4 of these have a watershed-based nutrient export target in general for the watershed, and then they also have nutrient export targets that are specific for new development. And they do that through post-construction site and nutrient accounting. They can either have on-site stormwater treatment or they use nutrient offsets. Some of the rules have a requirement for trying to reduce nutrient runoff from existing development. And there's a variety of ways, and I'll try and explain some of those. But first, so we've had this conversation here about delegated versus designated. All of the nutrient management strategy participants are designated. It's just that in the use of the Tarpamla Code, they are specifically named. In Falls Lake and Jordan Lake, it's basically any jurisdiction that is present within the watershed. So, and that includes any that are new. So for instance, Falls Lake didn't originally have Mebane in it as one of the participants, but Mebane annexed a part of the Falls Lake watershed. Falls Lake rules now apply in Mebane. So those numbers up there, we have the numbers of participants involved for the different types of rules, new development versus existing development. For the News and Pamlico, the first set of numbers apply to the original set of rules, which are currently what they're still implementing right now. And they're in the process of updating their implementation. The second set of numbers is described as the number of jurisdictions that are in the new rules that were adopted in 2020. So the local government responsibilities are primarily through new development requirements for either managing nitrogen or nitrogen and phosphorus in stormwater. And they do that through approving a stormwater plan for new development. They need to have a stormwater nutrient management ordinance. Usually in order to implement this, they have to have a review process so that they can have these approved stormwater plans. They have to require calculations for these different sites. Now, and it's all very site specific. And then they need to ensure that any stormwater control measures in place get maintenance. These new development programs also have some supporting activities. One of them is illicit discharge detection and elimination. Some of the watersheds have that in their new development, and some of them have it in their existing development. Same with public education and outreach. And mapping the storm drain system is included in those, and that's really part of the illicit discharge program. All 4 of the watersheds also have record keeping and annual reporting of different kinds. So Jordan Lake and Falls Lake are 2 that have an existing development stormwater rule. And the idea behind that is that you have this existing development out there that is exporting a certain amount of nitrogen and phosphorus, and there's a goal to try to reduce the export from there. Some of that, for both of them, requires that they identify potential stormwater retrofit projects. Falls Lake has a much more complicated existing development stormwater program. Initially, they need to reduce loads from discharging sand filters, from malfunctioning septic. But then they also have to produce local programs. And we had a model program which guides them in producing their local program, approved in January 2021. And their local programs, it's more specific what it covers. They need to estimate the nutrient loads that have occurred, the increase in load from between the end of a baseline period and the point where they adopted their new development ordinances. So it's trying to cover any development that went in after baseline, but before they were actively trying to control what's coming out of new development. And then come up with plans to offset these exports through all kinds of nutrient reduction strategies. They have to have an implementation schedule and accounting methods. Basically, they put together a plan of how they can make this happen. Local programs have been submitted and they're under review, and we expect to present them to you this year. So program evaluation. So what I've got up here is what is in the rule. It's not an awful lot that's specified in the rule. We have a requirement that DWR review all local implementation programs with a final approval by the EMC. We also have annual reports that they're supposed to submit describing the progress of implementation. Our goal is for local governments to have compliant and functional stormwater programs. And so our methods of evaluating these is not right now through an audit, but primarily through reviewing their local program and then through looking at what we get in terms of annual reports. So for instance, as NUSA and TAR-Pamlico local governments are developing new local programs, this gives us an opportunity to talk with them about what exactly they're doing, to ask them for the kind of specifics that they're planning for their specific ordinance for their program, how they're going to implement this stuff. And we've had a lot of one-on-one conversations to talk with them about how they can have a better stormwater program, or in the case of someone, it's a new stormwater program. And then that gives us the opportunity also to ask them, what specifically do you want to tell us about every year in terms of your implementation? And that gives us something to hold them to say, you were going to tell us about how many public education events you're going to have. Is it in your annual report? So we have guidance documents. We have one is a nutrient calculator. This is stormwater nitrogen and phosphorus tool, and that is presently used in Falls Lake, and it's available for use in Jordan Lake, but that's mostly just for local governments just to know what's happening. They're not required to use it for any purpose. The NUSA and TAR-Pamlico, those that are presently implementing are using other methods, but as they adopt their new local programs, they'll be using this nutrient calculator. For the NUSA and TAR-Pamlico, we brought the model program to you last year, and that had a development guide for local programs. It had a model stormwater ordinance and a model stormwater management plan template that we produced by working with the MS4 program. A lot of these local governments are MS4, and the nutrient management strategy is what's considered a qualified alternative program. And what that means is that the requirements of that nutrient management strategy for stormwater can be slotted in for the post-construction stormwater part of the MS4's permit. So we wanted to be able to coordinate so that local governments could have a single local program or a stormwater management plan that covered and integrated both their MS4 and their nutrient management strategy, which is a qualifying alternative program. Then for Falls Lake, we have a new development model program, and a model ordinance, and an existing development model program. We also have a catalog of nutrient reduction practices, and that's not just stormwater control measures, but it's other measures that local governments can use, like, say, storm drain cleanout. And then Jordan Lake presently has, in addition to its buffer rule, it has the existing development rule where they simply identify retrofits and a few other things that they report on for their existing development. And so we have web pages and contacts. So there's 3 of us. I'm the coordinator of contact for Neuse and Tarp Pamlico. John Heisman's the contact for Falls Lake, and Patrick Beggs, the contact for Jordan Lake. And that's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? I would say the nutrient program is probably the most popular before the EMC. They seem to come frequently compared to some of the others with rule development, program approval, and we are expected to see some more this summer from that. I think we have tremendous effort going on by staff across all of these programs. Clearly, it's a very sophisticated series of programs that we have to follow and understand as a commission, because we do have these come before us periodically. And I think today's been a useful tool. It's a long, tedious effort to put the presentation together and for us to follow it, but I think this will be a valuable resource for us to reference, including this wonderful sheet that y'all put together. I will ask, is there anyone in the department who is the first stop for a local government if they need to understand what they need to do across all these programs?
All of these programs. I don't know that we've designated them. I think that they tend to go to their regional office, but I don't believe.
So that there would be someone from the Division of Water Resources and DIMLR that they go to in the regional office.
I can tell you the pattern. They go to regional office. But.
Karen Higgins, Division of Water Resources. The division of their DEECs, environmental assistance and customer service, they do have a sort of a permit coordinator within regional offices that handle coordinate with the different divisions. So the local governments can reach out to that permit coordinator through DEECs, but I think most local governments that fall under the programs presented today talk directly with the staff that you've seen here.
Thank you. Yes, and I always pictured the permit assistance group as being with industrial, but they could be the go-to for local governments too, then you're saying. Any questions, any comments about these programs? Did today help? It certainly revealed the magnitude of it all. So, well, we thank you very much, and it's always good to have faces associated with these programs, and we, as individuals, can contact you if we need to understand something better. So, thanks. That really is the end of our program. We have 2 action items on our agenda tomorrow that we acted on recently. Well, one acted on recently, and then hearing officer and Vice Chair Harris, we thank you for your service on the triennial review that we'll hear tomorrow. I have a table that I've kept over the past two years of topics of interest, and I had hoped to have it ready for you today with an update on status, but I do not. I'm still working with the staff also on a calendar that they keep of what to expect in 2022, and I want to make sure those flow consistently. So maybe watch for it between now and May. our director had to move on to another meeting. He sends his regrets that he couldn't stay for the end, but I'm sure we'll hear a report from him tomorrow. And then I would also say that as far as the calendar for 2022, one reminder to all of us, we recently approved the Coastal Habitat Protection Plan, and there are some goals set for the end of calendar year 22 for that, dealing with chlorophyll A and light penetration from an SAV perspective. So we will be hearing more probably from the division about that in the future. They are getting organized to work on that part of the chip. So any comments, closing comments from any of our members? We managed to do this in 2 hours, so thank you very much for staying with us, and have safe travels this evening, and see you tomorrow. Meeting adjourned.